There is one animal that has lived alongside human beings for thousands of years, not as a beast of burden, not as a source of food, not as a working animal, but simply as a companion, as a presence, as something that sits beside us, watches us with ancient eyes, and makes us feel somehow less alone in the universe. The cat. And the love humanity has for cats, the internet obsession, the millions of cat videos, the way a purring cat can calm the most anxious human heart. All of that may trace its origins back to one extraordinary goddess in ancient Egypt, who 5,000 years ago declared the cat to be the most sacred animal in the world. Her name was Bastet, the cat goddess, the Lady of the East, the goddess of home, music, dance, joy, and the fierce protective love of a mother. She was the most popular goddess in all of ancient Egypt. Her festivals drew hundreds of thousands of people from across the entire ancient world, and her legacy quietly shaped the way humanity has related to cats and to the divine feminine ever since. This is her story. Bastet was one of the most ancient and most beloved goddesses in all of Egyptian religion. Her worship stretched back to at least 3000 BCE, making her one of the oldest deities in the entire Egyptian pantheon. She was the daughter of Ra, the supreme sun god, which gave her both solar and lunar qualities depending on the era of her worship. In her earliest form, Bastet was actually a lioness goddess, fierce, solar, and terrifying, closely related to her sister Sekhmet, the goddess of war and plague. But as Egyptian civilization developed and the domestic cat became increasingly important in Egyptian daily life, Bastet evolved. She softened from a lioness into a cat, retaining her fierce protective power but adding warmth, gentleness, music, and joy to her divine nature. Bastet held a remarkable range of roles in Egyptian religion. She was the goddess of home and hearth, the divine protector of the household, the family, and the domestic space. She was the goddess of music, dance, and festivity. Her worship was accompanied by the most joyful and elaborate celebrations in all of Egypt. She was the goddess of motherhood and fertility, protecting pregnant women, mothers, and children with fierce maternal love. She was the protector against evil spirits and disease. Her presence in the home was believed to drive away demons, sickness, and bad luck. And she was the Eye of Ra, a title shared with several powerful goddesses, meaning she carried the fierce protective power of Ra himself, capable of turning from gentle cat to devastating lioness in an instant when those she loved were threatened. Bastet was one of the most ancient and most beloved goddesses in all of Egyptian religion. Her worship stretched back to at least 3000 BCE, making her one of the oldest deities in the entire Egyptian pantheon. She was the daughter of Ra, the supreme sun god, which gave her both solar and lunar qualities depending on the era of her worship. In her earliest form, Bastet was actually a lioness goddess, fierce, solar, and terrifying, closely related to her sister Sekhmet, the goddess of war and plague. But as Egyptian civilization developed and the domestic cat became increasingly important in Egyptian daily life, Bastet evolved. She softened from a lioness into a cat, retaining her fierce protective power but adding warmth, gentleness, music, and joy to her divine nature. Bastet held a remarkable range of roles in Egyptian religion. She was the goddess of home and hearth, the divine protector of the household, the family, and the domestic space. She was the goddess of music, dance, and festivity. Her worship was accompanied by the most joyful and elaborate celebrations in all of Egypt. She was the goddess of motherhood and fertility, protecting pregnant women, mothers, and children with fierce maternal love. She was the protector against evil spirits and disease. Her presence in the home was believed to drive away demons, sickness, and bad luck. And she was the Eye of Ra, a title shared with several powerful goddesses, meaning she carried the fierce protective power of Ra himself, capable of turning from gentle cat to devastating lioness in an instant when those she loved were threatened. One of the most fascinating things about Bastet is her dual nature, and understanding this duality is the key to understanding everything about her. On one side, Bastet was the embodiment of gentleness, warmth, and joy. She was the goddess you prayed to for a happy home, healthy children, good music, and protection from bad spirits. She was the goddess whose sacred animal purred and kneaded and curled up in your lap. Her festivals were filled with laughter, wine, music, and dancing. People loved Bastet the way they love a warm fire on a cold night. She made the world feel safe and good. But on the other side, Bastet was the daughter of Ra, the Eye of Ra, the solar lioness who in her most ancient form could unleash plague, fire, and devastation upon the enemies of her father. And this fiercer side never truly disappeared. It simply waited, patient and still, like a cat watching a mouse, for the moment when it was needed. The Egyptians told a story called the Distant Goddess, in which Bastet, or her fiercer sister Sekhmet, traveled far from Egypt in anger, transforming into a wild and deadly lioness in the desert. Ra sent a god, sometimes Thoth, sometimes Shu, to bring her back, calming her fury with music, stories, and offerings of wine until she transformed from lioness back to cat and returned to bless Egypt with her presence. This story captures the essential truth about Bastet, and perhaps about cats themselves. The animal that sits calmly in your lap, blinking slowly and purring, is the same animal that hunts with deadly precision and can scratch a wound that will not heal. The warmth and the danger live together. The purr and the growl come from the same throat. Bastet was beloved because she was both, and the Egyptians were wise enough to love both sides of her completely. Every great goddess deserves a great city, and Bastet had one of the most magnificent in all of ancient Egypt. Her sacred city was called Bubastis, known in the ancient Egyptian language as Purr Bastet, meaning the house of Bastet. Located in the eastern Nile Delta, Bubastis was one of the most important religious centers in all of Egypt, and at its height served as the capital of the entire nation. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt around 450 BCE and left detailed accounts of what he saw, described the temple of Bastet at Bubastis as the most beautiful temple in all of Egypt. More beautiful than the temple of Ra at Heliopolis. More beautiful than the temple of Ptah at Memphis. This was an extraordinary claim in a country famous for its spectacular temples. According to Herodotus, the temple stood on an island surrounded on three sides by canals filled with water from the Nile. Enormous ancient trees shaded the temple grounds. The sanctuary itself was relatively modest in size, but surrounded by a vast, sacred precinct of breathtaking beauty. As you approached through the city, the temple appeared to sit lower than the buildings around it, giving it the magical quality of looking like a sacred jewel set into the earth rather than rising above it. Thousands of sacred cats lived in and around the temple, fed, cared for, and treated as living manifestations of the goddess herself. When these sacred cats died, they were mummified with the same care and reverence given to human priests and buried in the sacred cat cemetery at Bubastis. When archaeologists excavated this cemetery in the modern era, they found hundreds of thousands of cat mummies, evidence of a devotion to Bastet that lasted for thousands of years. The annual festival of Bastet at Bubastis was, according to Herodotus, the single largest and most attended festival in all of ancient Egypt. And Herodotus had seen a lot of festivals. He reported that more people came to the festival of Bastet than to any other festival in the country. He estimates up to 700,000 people attended in a single year. 700,000. In the ancient world, this was a number almost impossible to comprehend. People traveled to Bubastis from every corner of Egypt and from foreign lands beyond. They traveled by boat along the Nile, and the journey itself was part of the celebration. As the boats sailed toward Bubastis, the passengers sang, played music, clapped, danced, and made offerings. Women shook their sistrums and called out to the people on the riverbanks. Men played flutes and drums. Wine flowed freely. When they arrived at Bubastis, the celebration continued for days. Dancing, feasting, music, drinking, and elaborate religious ceremonies in the temple itself. It was, by every ancient account, the most joyful event in the entire Egyptian calendar. But the festival was not merely about pleasure. It carried deep spiritual meaning. The joy, the music, the wine, all of these were offerings to Bastet herself. The Egyptians believed that joy was sacred, that laughter was divine, that music was a form of prayer, that celebrating life fully and gratefully was itself an act of worship. Bastet was the goddess who understood this most completely, that the divine does not only live in solemn temples and whispered prayers. It lives in the laughter of friends and the music of a dance and the warmth of a cup shared between people who are grateful to be alive. The relationship between Bastet and the cats of ancient Egypt is one of the most extraordinary examples of an animal becoming truly sacred in all of human history. It began practically. Cats in ancient Egypt were incredibly valuable. They killed the rats and snakes that threatened the grain stores that fed the entire civilization. Without cats, the harvest would have been devastated by rodents. Without the harvest, Egypt would have starved. Cats were literally keeping Egypt alive. But the Egyptians saw beyond the practical value and recognized something deeper, something in the nature of the cat itself that seemed genuinely divine. The way cats moved, fluid, silent, impossibly graceful. The way their eyes caught the light in the darkness, glowing green and gold like miniature suns. The way they could be fully wild and fully domestic in the same moment. The way they chose to be with humans, not from need like a dog, but from something closer to preference, to decision, to will. The Egyptians recognized in all of this the presence of Bastet herself, and so they elevated the cat from useful animal to sacred being. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt was a crime punishable by death, even if it was accidental. When a family cat died, the entire household would shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. The cat would be mummified and brought to Bubastis for burial. Foreign visitors to Egypt were sometimes stunned and baffled by the intensity of Egyptian grief over the death of a cat. When a fire broke out in an Egyptian building, people would rush past their belongings to save the cats first. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus recorded witnessing a Roman soldier accidentally kill a cat in Egypt, and despite the Egyptian government's desire to maintain good relations with Rome, the crowd tore the soldier to pieces in the street. Such was the sacred status of Bastet's animal. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE and Greek culture began to merge with Egyptian traditions, Bastet traveled with Egyptian religion into the Greek world and then into the Roman world, where she was worshipped across the entire empire. But her deepest and most lasting legacy is one so woven into the fabric of daily human life that most people never think about at all. The domestic cat, the single most popular pet animal in the world today, the subject of more internet content than almost anything else in human history. The creature that has lived in human homes for over 10,000 years and shows absolutely no signs of leaving. Many historians believe that the sacred status of cats in ancient Egypt played a direct role in the spread of domestic cats across the ancient world. Egyptian sailors brought cats on their ships, officially to control rodents, but also because cats were sacred and their presence was considered protective and lucky. From Egyptian ports, cats spread to Greece, Rome, Persia, India, and eventually the entire world. Every cat that has ever sat on a human lap and purred. Every kitten video that has ever made a tired person smile at the end of a hard day. Every person who has ever felt less alone because a cat chose to sit beside them. All of that traces back, in some small but real way, to Bastet. To the ancient Egyptians who looked at this small, graceful, mysterious creature and saw divinity in it. Who decided that joy was sacred, that the domestic was holy, that the purring warmth of a cat in your home was a form of the goddess herself, present and protective and endlessly, quietly loving. Bastet lives on in every cat alive today, and she is still watching over us. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more incredible ancient stories.